Mr. Speaker. We know why it's happened, because it's what socialists do.
That was the Shadow Chancellor on the floor of the House of Commons. And Labour's frontbench had no answer.
And I can tell you that if sustained through the forecast period, that would mean over £5 billion of additional debt servicing costs. That's about £300 for every working family in this country. That's the effect of Andy Burnham, and he hasn't even arrived here yet.
Wait until you hear what a Labour MP said in defence of that. You will not believe it.
People in this country are fed up of bond markets dabbling in the democracy of our country.
Bond markets dabbling in democracy. That's a Labour MP defending the government. And that's not even the worst part. Because another voice said the markets should just fall in line. If what you just heard made your jaw drop, share this video right now. Someone in your circle needs to see it. Hit like, subscribe to the channel. Now let's go back to where it all started.
This King's speech is an empty vessel, which is a surprise because only last week, Mr. Speaker, the Prime Minister was telling anybody who cared to listen that the government would be leaning into economic growth in a more radical way, eschewing managerial incrementalism. And yet we have heard nothing other than that, at best, from the Right Honourable Lady just now. Of course. Gentleman just now.
Easy mistake to make.
If only the Chancellor were here, Mr. Speaker, I'd be right about everything. But it was also, of course, the Prime Minister who said, that Labour would now tread more lightly on our lives. Well, we've seen what that has meant in the last few weeks. It was also said by the Chancellor that, of course, it would all be growth, growth, growth. And whilst the Right Honourable Gentleman trots out and trumpets the latest uplift in the forecast, very modest uplift of the IMF, he neglects to mention that they were actually forecasting back in January 1.3%, not the 1% today. He neglects to mention that that increase in the first quarter of this year is on the back of a risible growth performance in Q4 of last year, exacerbated, according to the OBR and the Bank of England, by the fact that his party and his Chancellor flew every single possible tax rise going and had a material impact on depressing the economy. So some of this growth is simply a bounce back from the mistakes that were made at the end of last year. He refused to answer, I will momentarily, he refused to answer the question from my honourable friend as to what had happened to per capita GDP. So let me tell him, it has been utterly anaemic throughout this government's period in office. And also he failed to mention, Mr. Speaker, that in the notes to the IMF's comments on upgrading the growth forecast for this year, they point to domestic uncertainty possibly weighing down on consumer spending and investment decisions. I wonder what they could possibly be referring to, Mr. Speaker, when they talk about domestic uncertainty. And as to our record, I need to remind him that on the day of the general election, we had inflation bang on target at 2%. It's now 50% more than that. We had the fastest growth in the G7. We had employment at near record levels. We had near record low levels of unemployment. And we had 13 consecutive months of real wage growth. And I give way to the gentleman at the back.
I thank the Shadow Chancellor for giving way. On the subject of mistakes made and growth, does he accept that the Brexit that he left us and his party left us has knocked between 4 and 8% off our GDP?
Well, as I will come on to argue, Mr. Speaker, our problems actually rest a little bit closer to home than anything to do with our relationship with the European Union. This party promised stability. They also, and please try not to laugh too loudly, said that they would create the most pro-business government in the history of our country. None of that, Mr. Speaker, none of that has come to pass. In fact, it's not just the Prime Minister that is the problem. Whoever goes on to lead the Labour Party, if this Prime Minister is replaced, will not do any better. And the reason is this, that the party opposite had no plan as to how to improve our economy. They had no plan at all. They had a plan to win an election, which is to keep your profile as low as you can, to hold the Ming vase and tiptoe across the shiny floor towards that loveless landslide. But they had no plan for the people of our country. And they are in hock to their own backbenchers, Mr. Speaker. We know that every time they try and do something that requires some backbone, they are stopped by their backbenchers. And, Mr. Speaker, the record of this government is appalling, not just on growth. Unemployment. I notice the right honourable gentleman did not mention unemployment once, and he certainly didn't mention youth unemployment, because the record is appalling. The highest unemployment in 5 years under this government. Youth unemployment nudging up towards 20%. Under the last Labour government, I will in a moment, under the last Labour government, Mr. Speaker, youth unemployment increased by over 40%. Under the last Conservative government, it reduced by over 40%. And I give way to the honourable.
I'm grateful to my right honourable friend. Isn't it shameful that the government is now having to subsidise employers in taking on young people, when in fact it's the government's very actions in imposing higher national insurance charges, higher minimum wage, higher burden in the Employment Rights Act that have caused the problem in the first place?
The honourable friend is entirely right. It's like trying to apply the accelerator whilst having the brake on full tilt. That is what this government is doing, the total illogicality of the approach that they are taking. And when it comes to inflation, inflation is up compared to where it was under us. It's about the highest in the G7. It certainly was last year. And as we lean into the challenges of oil price and gas price spikes, that is a weak position to be in, and most economists will make that point. When it comes to borrowing, Mr. Speaker, the party opposite has borrowed a full £250 billion more across this Parliament compared to the plans that they inherited. No wonder that our borrowing costs are the highest in the G7. They are higher than Greece. They are higher even than Morocco. And why has this happened, Mr. Speaker? We know why it's happened, because it's what socialists do. What socialists do is they believe that you can tax your way to prosperity. I tell the right honourable gentleman, you cannot. The £25 billion of additional tax on businesses, national insurance increases, has crucified business in this country. It has fallen predominantly, I will in a moment, it has fallen predominantly on young people, because it was not just an increase in the rate, it was a reduction of the threshold at which that tax cuts in. And that means that young people have borne the brunt of that tax increase. And the sectors that rely predominantly on first-time jobbers, young workers, part-time workers, female workers, have been crucified in turn. And that includes the retail, hospitality and leisure sector, where over 100,000 jobs have been destroyed by this government.
Destroyed. 100,000 jobs in retail, hospitality, leisure, the sectors that rely on young workers, part-time workers, women, gone. Under a government that promised, and I quote, growth, growth, growth. Keep watching, because it gets worse.
I give way to the...
I thank my right honourable friend for giving way. And in Bognor Regis and Littlehampton, I opened the new Premier Inn on Friday this week, a project that was passed under the last Conservative government. But in my constituency, many businesses are failing because of the increased costs and regulation. Would the right honourable friend to me agree that this is an absolute travesty for our country?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, and I've had great pleasure in visiting her constituency in the past to speak to businesses, and it's exactly what they complain of. The government has taken no efforts to get on top, in this King's Speech, of the benefits bill. There is a reference to it and the Timms review. And what we know with the Timms review on personal independence payments, Mr. Speaker, is within its terms of reference is an explicit statement that this is not about controlling the welfare bill. There will be no savings as a consequence of the Timms review. That is not good enough. We have got to be about getting people off benefits and back into work. I'll give way.
Does my honourable friend not agree that we're seeing not only the letting down of young people, but actually a deeply immoral act of keeping people on welfare, when we know that in 5 or 10 years' time, when they've been on welfare for so long that they won't have any options, they will be left effectively slaves of a state that has no concern for them, and nobody in this chamber today will have any power over how the welfare state will behave then, but they will have no options, and it will be this House's fault and that government's fault for having kept them there and imprisoned them.
That is entirely right. Mr. Speaker, on this side of the House, we know that work matters. We know that it matters to get people off benefits. We know that people's mental health is improved by people going to work, having that social interaction, that routine, that sense of pride and self-worth that comes with work. And that is why the unemployment levels and the failure of this government to tackle benefits is so appalling. I give way to the honourable lady.
So I thank the Shadow Minister for giving way. I actually used to work in the employment service, and under Thatcher, she was encouraging us to take people off of signing on and sign them on the sick. You created a whole generation of people on the sick just to manipulate the numbers. How do you like those apples?
Well, Mr. Speaker, I think all these flashbacks to the 1980s are a slightly desperate attempt to get away from the 2020s, I think. The other thing that socialists love to do, I will in a moment, I'll make some progress, that socialists love to do, Mr. Speaker, is they love to borrow and borrow and borrow and spend and spend and spend until they run out of other people's money. And that is precisely what this government has done. When it comes to fiscal rules that the right honourable gentleman mentioned, of course he failed to mention that this Chancellor, in the run-up to the election, said she would abide by our fiscal rules. She promptly changed them so that she could borrow more, flipping from public sector net debt as a definition of debt to public sector financial liabilities. It allowed her to take the brake off and to borrow and spend even more as a consequence. I give way.
I'm flashing back to the 1980s. And would the right honourable member like to remind us when the Conservatives last balanced a budget?
The current account went into a slight surplus just around 2015-16, around that sort of level. The current account did, actually, and that was on the back of inheriting a £160 billion deficit from the party opposite in 2010, running at over 10% of GDP. Another example of the disasters of a Labour government in action. And the right honourable gentleman earlier spoke of artificial intelligence and the opportunities, and he's quite right to do that. He's quite right to do that. But what we know of artificial intelligence in the labour market is it will have a profound effect on the labour market and a very uncertain effect. And what we know is that we need a flexible skills off to deal with that, and we need flexible labour markets. But what this government is doing through the Employment Rights Bill is making the labour market more rigid, and that is going to hurt particularly younger people who do not have a track record in employment. So do not be surprised if youth unemployment continues to hover around 16–17% as a consequence of the actions of this government. Now, of course, we know that when it comes to leaning into these challenges, there's no plan. This government's not going to do anything. It's just involved in internecine introspection, a civil war now within the Labour Party. They said that they would tread lightly on our lives. In fact, they're now stampeding all over them. And the rivals to the Prime Minister now are going to be looking to double down on the very policies that I have just set out, these ruinous policies. We've seen the real effects of this in recent days. On Friday, when the honourable member for Makerfield said that he would step down in order to ease the passage of Andy Burnham to this place, what happened to gilt yields on that day? They spiked up 18 basis points. Now, I've done a little bit of research, Mr. Speaker, and I can tell you that if sustained through the forecast period, that would mean over £5 billion of additional debt servicing costs. That's about £300 for every working family in this country. That's the effect of Andy Burnham, and he hasn't even arrived here yet.
£300 per working family from a single announcement before Burnham has taken his seat. Now, to be fair, markets move for many reasons, and one speech isn't the whole picture. But when gilt yields spike 18 basis points on the day a politician's name is mentioned, the market is telling you something. So here's what I want to know from you. Does Andy Burnham arriving in Westminster make the economy better or worse? Watch what comes next, because Labour's own MPs give you the answer.
We are on the edge of a precipice economically, leaning into a very turbulent time. These are the policies of the madhouse. and yet we're told not to worry. The honourable member for Liverpool Wavertree, who I believe is an outrider for Andy Burnham, said of the bond markets that they would just have to, and I quote, fall in line. The bond markets will just have to fall in line. Andy Burnham himself said in the New Statesman, and I quote, we've got to get beyond this thing. I will in a moment. We've got to get...
Just points of order, Paul.
Speaker, my understanding is if an honourable member is mentioning another honourable member in the chamber, they are supposed to give advance notice. I've received no such notice.
That's not the case. The case is, if the member's not here, they should have informed them, as you sat there, quite rightly. And what I would say is, I'm sure that the Shadow Chancellor is ready to give way immediately. Mr Belstride.
Right, always ready to give way, Mr Speaker, and to take your direction. Andy, yes, if you'd like to. Well, the honourable lady was still seated. I wasn't sure.
Thank you, Mr Speaker, and thank you to the Shadow Minister for giving way. I agree that that might not have been the most eloquent of answers. However, what I would say is that people in this country are fed up of bond markets dabbling in the democracy of our country.
I think, Mr Speaker, that's a rather unfortunate example of doubling down or continuing to dig, if I might say so. But the honourable lady's comments, well, I think, sort of pale when it comes to Andy Burnham's comments in the New Statesman, when he said of the bond markets, and I quote, we've got to get beyond this thing of being in hock to the bond markets. He also suggested that defence spending should lie outside the fiscal rules, as if spending and borrowing to defend our country is a different form of borrowing than any other borrowing this government might entertain. He's not so much the King of the North, he's more like King Canute, sitting in his chair on the sand, dressed in his football kit, trying to push back the tide of the bond markets, saying things like, you've got to fall in line. It's ludicrous, as the waters lap up around his ankles and we all ultimately will get swept away. In the King's speech, Mr Speaker, we had a holiday tax that's going to clobber the cost of holidays for the most budget holidays in this country, for people that have saved up hard, just want to have some memories with their children. We've also got the nationalisation of steel, which seems to me to just be some kind of political sop to the left on the Labour benches. We've got oil and gas. They're going to put a stop to new exploration as a result of this bill. This is lunacy when we are importing gas from Norway, extracting it from the same basin. We are also importing liquid natural gas, formerly from Qatar, now predominantly from the United States, which has 4 times the carbon footprint compared to if we had extracted it ourselves using our own resources. All that energy security blown, all those jobs destroyed, all that tax revenue foregone simply because of the ideological madness of the party opposite. And I give way to the honourable.
I thank the Shadow Chancellor for giving way, and he's completely right to reflect on the plight of the oil and gas sector under this Labour government. But on jobs, 1,000 jobs being lost a month, every single month in the oil and gas sector, affecting constituents of all of ours, not just those in the North East of Scotland. Does the Shadow Chancellor share my dismay that a Labour government does not take that more seriously?
I do indeed. I have been up to Aberdeen. I have met with the honourable lady, with my honourable friend, and I have heard firsthand about the effect that this is having economically. It is utterly madness. And if we have an opportunity in government, we will put that right. I've already mentioned benefits. Nothing about welfare of any substance in this bill. Nothing about the Defence Investment Plan. Where is the Defence Investment Plan? It was promised back in September. And then we have the Regulating for Growth bill. An oxymoron, if ever there was one. Regulating for growth speaks to the heart of all you need to know about this Labour government. They know nothing about the economy, nothing about job creation, nothing about businesses. Yep, briefly.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank the Shadow Minister for what he's saying? Does the Shadow Minister share my concerns and the concerns of probably many in this House that when it comes to small and medium businesses in particular, they will suffer more than most? In Northern Ireland, I think the figures are between 85 and 89% of the job creators in Northern Ireland are small businesses. So what Northern Ireland needs is something special from this government. Does he see something special coming? Or are we just wondering what's going to happen?
No, what I see coming, I'm afraid, Mr. Speaker, is what's already baked in, which is business rates going up through the roof. In some cases, small businesses in our high streets facing 140% increases in the amount that they're having to pay by way of business rates. This side of the House, Mr. Speaker, we believe in enterprise. We believe in opportunity, we believe in aspiration, we believe in markets, we believe in risk takers, we believe in people that work hard, people that get up in the morning early and do the right thing, go out and create wealth, create jobs and grow our economy. And because of that, we set out at our last conference £47 billion worth of savings, including predominantly on the welfare budget, £23 billion. And with that, you can do two wonderful things. One is you can start to bear down on the deficit and get on top of that debt, which is out of control under this government. But secondly, you can get taxes down, particularly on the productive parts of the economy. So we announced the abolition of stamp duty and a tax cut for young people. And there's more in our alternative King's Speech. A bill to back our high streets, to cut business rates for 250,000 of our high street businesses, a Get Britain Working bill to reverse the damage done by the Employment Rights Act, a reducing bureaucracy bill to remove the mountain of environmental, social and governance regulations, a Save British Industry bill to get rid of the Climate Change Act and to abolish the ZEV mandate, a cheap energy bill to get rid of renewable subsidies and bring down bills for households and businesses, a Get Britain drilling bill to reinvigorate our North Sea oil and gas industry, creating jobs and boosting our exports, and a welfare reform bill to get the benefits bill under control and to restore the two-child cap. That is the serious plan that our economy needs. That is the plan to back our businesses and to deliver growth. That is a Conservative plan for a better Britain.
The mainstream media won't run this clip in full. If this speech matters to you, drop your answer in the comments right now. Would you trust Andy Burnham with the British economy? Best answer gets pinned. Hit like, subscribe, and we'll keep showing you what they'd rather you didn't see.